The surrender. April 29, 1945. 7:10 hours. Outskirts of Oldenburg, Lower Saxony. Cold rain needles the back of exposed hands. Mud sucks at boots with every step. A Canadian Bren gunner shifts his grip as a white scrap of cloth flutters above a hedgerow, barely visible through drifting smoke. The air smells of wet earth, cordite and burned fuel. Somewhere nearby an engine ticks as it cools. No birds. No civilians. Just the hollow quiet that follows artillery. Then movement. Figures rise slowly from the ditch. One by one. Helmets first. Then faces. Too smooth. Too young. Rifles are raised instinctively, Lee Enfield snapping into shoulders, safeties clicking off. A corporal shouts commands in clipped English, his voice sharp from weeks without rest. Hands up. Slow. Now. The Germans obey. They step into the open, boots sinking into the churned ground, hands shaking as they lift them high. Field gray uniforms hang loose on narrow frames. Belts cinched too tight. Sleeves rolled down to hide how thin the arms really are. A boy, no older than 16, stares straight ahead, jaw locked so hard it trembles. Another blinks rain from his lashes, lips moving silently as if rehearsing a prayer he's been told won't matter. You can see it in their eyes. They're not calculating escape routes. They're counting seconds. A Canadian lieutenant pushes forward, revolver low but ready. He scans the group quickly, 8 prisoners. No officer among them. No insignia worth saluting. Just Volkssturm armbands, Hitler Youth badges hastily torn off. Children. Someone mutters it under their breath. Someone else swears softly. The boys are ordered to kneel. They comply immediately, knees dropping into the mud without protest. Rifles clatter onto the ground, heavy Mausers that look oversized in their hands. One of the prisoners flinches at the sound, shoulders hunching as if expecting the crack of a rifle behind him. None comes. Rain taps against steel helmets. A wind carries the distant thud of artillery, closer now but moving away. The war is collapsing forward, mile by mile, hour by hour. The German boys stare at the ground. They've been told this moment would end one way. Their instructors promised it, told them the Canadians would line them up. That surrender meant disgrace, then death. That mercy was a lie invented by enemies. A freckled boy squeezes his eyes shut. Another swallows hard, Adam's apple bobbing, breath shallow and fast. His fingers dig into his sleeves, nails cutting through wet wool. Behind them, Canadian infantry spread out, checking the hedgerow, scanning for hidden weapons. A Sherman tank idles nearby, engine rumbling like a distant animal. No one speaks for several seconds. Then the lieutenant steps closer. He crouches, bringing himself eye level with the nearest prisoner. The boy smells soap, real soap, mixed with cigarette smoke. It's confusing. Disorienting. The lieutenant studies the face in front of him. 17, maybe younger. Dirt smeared across one cheek. A healing scrape on the chin. You understand English? He asks. No answer. The boy's breath catches. The lieutenant straightens. Looks back at his men. Faces hard, exhausted. These soldiers have marched through Normandy, the Scheldt, the Rhineland. They've seen friends cut down by machine gun fire. They've cleared houses where no one surrendered. This is supposed to be routine. It doesn't feel like it. Orders come down the line. Prisoners secured, weapons cleared, move them to the rear. Standard procedure. Efficient. Detached. But as the Canadians begin to bind hands and form the boys into a column, something hangs in the air, an unspoken tension, thick as the rain-soaked smoke. One of the boys finally looks up. He locks eyes with a Canadian private no more than 5 years older than him. For a moment, neither moves. Neither blinks. Then the boy whispers, barely audible. Bitte. Please. The private freezes. Behind them, a distant gunshot echoes. Not close, but close enough to make every prisoner flinch as one. Shoulders jerk. Heads duck. A few brace themselves, muscles tightening in preparation for pain that doesn't come. Seconds pass. Nothing happens. The Canadian soldiers exchange looks. Confusion. Unease. These boys are waiting for something terrible. They're certain it's coming. And the Canadians realize, all at once, that what happens in the next few minutes will stay with everyone here long after the war ends. The lieutenant takes a slow breath. Then gives an order no one expects. What they expected. The order ripples quietly down the line. Not shouted. Not barked. Just spoken. The Canadian soldiers loosen their posture. Rifles lower a fraction. Fingers ease off triggers. One man pulls a cigarette from a crushed pack, lights it with shaking hands, then remembers himself and pockets it again. The tension doesn't vanish, it shifts. The German boys don't understand what's happening. They're still kneeling, still staring at the mud, still bracing for the sound they were promised would come next. Their world has been reduced to inches of wet ground and the rhythm of their own breathing. In their minds, the sequence is clear. Capture, humiliation, execution. They've heard the stories whispered in barracks and shouted during drills. That Allied soldiers didn't take prisoners. That surrender was weakness, punished instantly. That mercy was something only Germans were capable of. A lie drilled into them until it felt like truth. One boy's hands are bound so tightly the rope burns his wrists. He doesn't complain. Pain is expected. Pain is familiar. He welcomes it because it means the waiting is almost over. Another silently recites his mother's name. A third stares at a dark stain on the ground, oil or blood, and wonders if his will splash there too. The Canadians begin moving them. Not toward a wall. Not into a clearing. But away from the front. Step by step, boots squelching, the prisoners are guided down the muddy track. A corporal walks beside them, close enough to grab a shoulder if someone bolts. No one does. They shuffle forward, shoulders hunched, heads low. You can feel their confusion growing with every step. This isn't right. They expected rough hands, shouting, blows to the back of the head. Instead, they're moved carefully, deliberately. When one stumbles, nearly falling face first into the muck, a Canadian reaches out without thinking, steadying him before pulling his hand back as if surprised by his own instinct. The boy freezes. He looks up. The Canadian avoids his eyes. Behind them, the battlefield fades. Artillery thumps soften. The smell of smoke gives way to damp grass and wet canvas. Ahead, a temporary Canadian staging area comes into view. Trucks parked haphazardly, men crouched over small cook fires shielded from the rain. The boys stop dead. This is worse, they think. This is where it happens. They are lined up again, this time near a hedgerow. Hands still bound. Guards posted. Everything about the formation screams finality. One of the youngest starts shaking uncontrollably. A Canadian medic notices first. He kneels, checks the boy's face, pale, lips tinged blue from cold and shock. He says something to the lieutenant, quiet but urgent. The lieutenant hesitates. He looks at the prisoners again. Really looks. The hollow cheeks. The unfocused stares. The way their uniforms swallow their bodies. These are not fanatics. These are not seasoned soldiers. These are kids who haven't slept properly in weeks. The lieutenant makes a decision. It isn't written in any field manual. A private is sent to the back of a truck. Crates are opened. Tin lids clatter. Someone curses softly as they fumble with a lid numbed by cold. The German boys hear the sounds. Metal on metal. Footsteps behind them. Their shoulders tense as one. This is it. One squeezes his eyes shut so hard it hurts. Another bites his lip until he tastes blood. Their breathing goes ragged. A sob slips out, sharp, uncontrollable, and the boy who makes the sound hates himself for it. Then a smell drifts through the rain. Sweet. Warm. Impossible. The first thing placed on the ground in front of them isn't a rifle. It's a mug. Steam curls into the gray air. Another follows. Then another. Tin cups, dented and scratched, filled with something dark and hot. Coffee weak but real. Milk added if there's enough to spare. The boys don't move. They stare at the mugs as if they might explode. A Canadian sergeant clears his throat. His voice is gruff, unsure. He gestures downward, two fingers pointing at the cups. Drink, he says. The word doesn't register. So he mimes it, lifting an invisible cup to his mouth. One boy finally looks up, eyes wide with disbelief. He shakes his head slightly, a reflexive refusal born from terror. This has to be a trick. A test. Something designed to break them before the end. No one shouts. No one hits him. A second item is placed down gently. A donut. Round. Pale. Slightly crushed from travel. Sugar clinging to damp fingers. A donut. It's absurd. It's surreal. It's devastating. One of the boys lets out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. He doesn't know how to process this moment, how something so ordinary can feel so overwhelming. Slowly, hesitantly, he reaches forward. The rope around his wrists prevents him from picking anything up properly. A Canadian notices, steps closer, knife already out. The boy flinches hard, recoiling, expecting the blade to flash for a different reason. Instead, the rope is cut. It falls away. The boy stares at his freed hands like they don't belong to him. Then, trembling, he lifts the mug. The heat seeps into his palms. Real heat. He drinks. And nothing bad happens. Around him, the other boys follow. some crying openly now, some laughing through tears, some just staring into their cups as if afraid the moment will vanish if they blink. The Canadians stand nearby, silent witnesses. None of them speak. Because they know, in this single, quiet exchange, something far more dangerous than gunfire has just occurred. The boys are no longer afraid of dying. They are starting to understand they might live. And for some of the men watching them, that realization hits harder than any battle they've fought. The human moment. The rain begins to ease, turning into a fine drizzle that glosses over the muddy ground. Steam rises from tin mugs like smoke from a campfire, curling into the gray sky. The boys clutch them tightly as though holding on to life itself. Their fingers are red and raw, but no one cares. Heat is proof. Warmth is proof. They are still here. A Canadian corporal kneels down, hands resting on his knees. He watches them, watches how fragile they look, how unnatural it is for teenagers to be armed and sent to fight a collapsing war. Dirt smudges across their cheeks, their uniforms wrinkled, sleeves torn. And yet, each face has a story, each stare carries fear, hope, confusion, and resignation all at once. One boy laughs suddenly, high, shaky, almost hysterical, then stops abruptly when he remembers where he is. The sound is shocking in its absurdity, but it's genuine. Another wipes tears from his eyes, uncertain whether he is crying or laughing. Around them, the Canadians shift, awkward, unsure how to act. They have been trained to fight, to kill, to follow orders. Not this. Not kindness. The corporal picks up a half-eaten donut, breaks it into small pieces, and places them carefully on a nearby piece of cloth. He gestures toward the boys with a nod. Tentatively, they reach for the pieces. They eat slowly, hesitating, as though tasting life itself for the first time in months. Some smile faintly, others stare at their hands, amazed the sugar exists and isn't poisoned or a trick. Nearby, a private produces a small box of chocolate, hands it over to the youngest boy. He hesitates, then unwraps it carefully, revealing a pale brown square, the scent unfamiliar but comforting. He bites into it and a soft exhale escapes. Relief, disbelief, joy. It is a human sound, almost forgotten in the cacophony of war. The others watch him and begin to understand. This is not a trap. They are not about to die. A sergeant, his voice rough from shouting in battle, finally speaks. "You're safe. For now," he says, and it is the simplest sentence, yet heavier than any order he has ever given. The boys look at him wide-eyed. They don't understand fully, but they feel it. The weight of life pressing down on them instead of the weight of imminent death. The Canadian soldiers begin moving around the camp, checking their surroundings, maintaining discipline, but always keeping an eye on the young prisoners. One soldier crouches to tie a shoelace for a trembling boy, awkwardly patting him on the shoulder afterward. Another helps a boy warm his hands over a small fire. Each gesture is deliberate, careful, a quiet rebellion against the violence they have known for months. And yet, the world outside remains chaotic. The distant rumble of artillery continues. Smoke curls along the horizon. A fighter plane passes overhead, low and fast, its engine screaming. For a fleeting moment, the boys glance toward the sky. The war is not over. Danger is everywhere. And yet, here, in this muddy field, something extraordinary is happening. The corporal steps back, scanning the boys' faces. He sees the shift in them, the change from fear to cautious hope. They start talking in hushed whispers, words jumbled and broken, yet they are alive, engaged, present. Some ask simple questions, pointing to the Canadians or the food. Their voices are shaky, fragile, but insist on being heard. For the first time in weeks, they are not soldiers. They are children. The lieutenant watches all this unfold, arms crossed, silent. He thinks about his own training, his own experiences, the battles, the losses. And yet, no manual prepared him for this. For the power of mercy to break the tension of war, for donuts and hot drinks to outweigh bullets, if only for a moment. It is absurd. Surreal. But undeniably real. A hush falls over the field. The drizzle stops. Only the soft murmur of voices, the clinking of mugs, the occasional cough or laugh. And then, without warning, one boy suddenly lifts his eyes, scanning the horizon. He freezes. The moment of calm shatters slightly. He thinks he sees movement. Enemy? Reinforcements? Death returning? His body tenses, instinct overriding reason. All the boys look up now, alert. The Canadians react immediately, guns raised again, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The calm has been fragile. The illusion of safety is thin. And yet, no one approaches. No attack comes. Just the wind. Just the drizzle. Just the smell of warm coffee and sugar in the damp air. The boys relax slowly. eyes wide, heartbeat still racing. They are learning something profound. War is not always cruelty. War is not always punishment. And in the hands of those who have chosen differently, war can show humanity. The realization. The boys sit huddled in the mud, mugs warming their frozen fingers, sugar from the donut sticking to wet sleeves. Their minds spin faster than the artillery echoing miles away. They look around, trying to reconcile what has happened. No shots. No executions. Just care. The concept is alien. Confusing. Almost unbearable. One of the older boys, 17 or 18, leans forward and whispers to his neighbor. Why are they helping us? His voice shakes, heavy with disbelief. The other shrugs, eyes darting between the Canadians and the tin cups. They cannot fathom it. Generations of propaganda, fear, and indoctrination scream at them that mercy is impossible. That kindness is a trick. That survival must come at the cost of others' suffering. The lieutenant observes silently, seeing the internal struggle writ across each face. He doesn't speak. There is no need. The answer is in the gestures. The cutting of ropes, the offering of food, the patience, the warmth. Small human acts that speak louder than orders, louder than bullets, louder than the collapsing world around them. One boy finally laughs, a short, breathless sound that erupts from the tension he didn't even realize he was holding. Another joins, unsure at first, then freer. Tears mix with mud and drizzle. The lieutenant notices that these boys, trained to fear death, are learning the impossible, that life can be given, not taken. That enemies can choose compassion. The Canadian sergeant steps closer, crouching beside a shivering boy. You've done nothing wrong here, he says simply. No lectures, no propaganda, no judgment, just words. They land like rain on dry earth. The boy nods slowly, unsure what this means, unsure if he should believe it. But the warmth in his chest, something unfamiliar, takes root. Other soldiers begin to relax as well. The discipline, the constant vigilance, the expectation of hate, momentarily suspended. They allow themselves to watch the boys eat, sip coffee, and laugh, understanding instinctively that this moment, fleeting as it is extraordinary. It is the human side of war, a side rarely seen, rarely recorded, but infinitely powerful. One of the boys, his hands trembling, lifts a half-eaten donut and holds it as if it were treasure. He glances at a Canadian private. The private meets his eyes, nods slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of understanding. For a moment, the distance between us and them collapses. They are simply people. Human beings. Children and men caught in the same rain-soaked chaos. And then, without warning, a rumble shakes the ground. Not artillery. Not an attack. Just a convoy of Canadian trucks approaching, wheels churning mud, engines growling through the morning mist. The boys freeze, instinct screaming danger. They clutch their mugs, donuts still in hand. Their past training surges forward, automatic, unthinking. The lieutenant gestures them back, calming, steadying. Easy. They're ours, he says. And slowly the boys begin to understand. The danger isn't coming from this side. They are safe. They are alive. For the first time in weeks, or months, they are not soldiers in a war they were forced into. They are just boys. But the realization hits harder than any gunfire. The war outside is still raging. The Allies are advancing. The Third Reich is collapsing. Yet, here in this small, rain-soaked field, something profound has been achieved. Life preserved, innocence glimpsed, fear temporarily conquered. Mercy has been chosen over vengeance. Humanity has survived. The lieutenant looks around at his men, seeing the exhaustion, the tension, the flicker of something that feels like hope. None of them trained for this moment. None expected it. And yet, this quiet act, food, warmth, human kindness, will linger longer in memory than any battle, any surrender, any bullet. A soft wind carries the scent of wet earth and coffee across the field. One boy slowly raises his eyes and meets the lieutenant's gaze again. His voice is barely audible, trembling. Danke, thank you. No one moves. No one replies immediately. Words are unnecessary. The simple recognition of life, of mercy, of choice, hangs heavy in the air. And for the first time, the boys understand they may yet see tomorrow. But in the distance, the sounds of war continue to echo. Somewhere danger still lurks. The moment of calm is fragile, temporary, a fleeting miracle in the chaos of collapse. And as the boys take tentative sips of coffee, they are painfully aware. It could vanish at any second. The fragile peace. The drizzle finally stops, leaving the mud glistening under a gray, low-hanging sky. The boys sit in a loose semicircle, some with cups clutched to their chests, others holding the remnants of donuts as if they were lifelines. Each breath visible in the cold air is heavy with disbelief. The world around them is still collapsing, the distant thumps of artillery, the hum of tanks on dirt roads, but here in this narrow clearing, there is an unlikely calm. A Canadian corporal, sleeves rolled up and rain streaked across his face, crouches beside one of the youngest boys. He points to the coffee and gestures, encouraging the boy to take another sip. The boy hesitates, then drinks, eyes widening at the warmth that spreads slowly through his frozen limbs. He glances at his companions, some of whom mirror the same tentative gestures. It is a ritual, fragile, almost sacred. Drink, eat, survive. The lieutenant surveys the field. He knows the war is ending, that the Third Reich's grip is slipping hour by hour, yet he cannot shake the weight of what these boys have endured, and what could have been. They were armed, barely trained, told that surrender meant death. Yet here they are, alive, held by hands that could have struck but instead chose restraint. Each soldier knows this act of mercy is an anomaly, a brief defiance of everything they have learned about war. One of the older boys, dark-haired and skeletal, shifts uncomfortably. He studies the Canadian soldiers, attempting to measure their intent. The words of Nazi officers echo in his mind, "No mercy. Fight to the last. You are expendable." He swallows hard, realizing the truth of what has just occurred. They were not just spared, they were cared for. A flood of conflicting emotions rushes through him. Gratitude, confusion, disbelief, and shame for having expected cruelty. Nearby, a private unwraps a small bar of chocolate and divides it among the boys. Each piece is tiny, but it carries weight far beyond its size. The youngest boy hesitates, examining the treat as though it were a foreign artifact, then bites. His eyes widen and a muffled laugh escapes. Others, emboldened by his reaction, follow suit. For a fleeting moment, the battlefield disappears. There are no guns, no orders, no propaganda. Just hunger, warmth, sweetness, and the fragile spark of life. A subtle shift occurs. The boys begin to relax. Their postures loosen. Shoulders uncoil. Breaths deepen. Quiet conversations start to form, fragmented and hesitant. One whispers a question about home. Another asks about the Canadians' uniforms, the badges, the guns. It is mundane, absurd even, but in these moments of ordinary curiosity, the boys reclaim a sliver of their lost childhood. The Canadian soldiers stand at the edges of the clearing, watching, vigilant yet unintrusive. They recognize something rare here, a moment that defies the brutal calculus of war. Their hands have been trained to fire, their instincts to kill. And yet, in small, deliberate gestures, they are teaching the boys a different lesson, that humanity can survive even amid chaos. But the world outside this temporary sanctuary is unforgiving. A distant artillery barrage erupts, shaking the ground, snapping the spell of calm. The boys freeze, mugs trembling in their hands. Hearts race again. Fear surges, old habits, old training, old terror. A Canadian lieutenant steps forward. His voice is firm but calm, slicing through the tension. "It's over. For now. Nothing's coming." He gestures toward the trucks waiting at the far edge of the field. "Move carefully. Stay together." The words are simple, but they are a tether between fear and safety. The boys rise slowly, still wary, still hesitant. The mugs are emptied, the crumbs of donuts clinging to fingers. One boy pauses, looking back at the small fire where warmth lingered, as if reluctant to leave the first place that made him feel alive in weeks. He glances at the Canadian soldiers, a silent understanding passing between them. No cheers, no applause. Just acknowledgement, humanity witnessed and reciprocated. A private kneels to fasten the shoelaces of the shivering boy, a small, almost invisible act of care. The boy nods faintly, unsure what to say. Gratitude feels dangerous, vulnerable. The lesson is heavier than any weapon. Life has been extended not through violence but through kindness. And yet, as they begin to march toward the trucks, the boys cannot forget the sound of gunfire beyond the clearing, the smoke curling along the horizon, the cold reminder that their survival is temporary, fragile, and hard-won. They carry with them the taste of coffee, the sweetness of sugar, and the unbearable weight of having lived when death was expected. Marching towards safety. The boys rise from the muddy clearing slowly, wrists still tender where ropes had burned into skin. Their boots squelch in unison as they begin the short march toward the waiting Canadian trucks. Each step is careful, hesitant, legs stiff from days of forced marches, fear and exhaustion. The drizzle has ceased, leaving the smell of wet earth and iron in the air. Steam rises from their damp uniforms as they breathe, a ghostly reminder of life in a world that has been so close to death. A Canadian corporal walks alongside the column, rifle slung across his back, eyes constantly scanning for threats. He keeps his voice low, offering directions in clipped English. Step carefully. Don't trip. Keep moving. The words are mundane, but to the boys they are grounding. The steady cadence of the corporal's instructions begins to replace the chaos of fear in their minds. They focus on the rhythm of marching, not the sound of distant artillery. One of the boys, barely 16, hesitates mid-step. His eyes flick toward a shell crater filled with water. He remembers the screams, the flashes, the warnings that surrender meant death. His body stiffens. The corporal notices immediately, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. No words this time. Just presence. The boy swallows hard and continues. He is alive. He is moving forward. That is enough. Behind them, the trucks wait with engines idling, metal groaning under the cold and rain. Soldiers organize the prisoners, ensuring they are seated safely, away from the edge, hands no longer bound. Blankets are handed out, and the boys wrap themselves tightly, shivering but slowly relaxing. Some peer out through the slats of the truck, eyes wide as the Canadian vehicles begin rolling forward. For the first time, the motion feels safe rather than threatening. The lieutenant rides alongside the convoy, watching the boys' expressions carefully. Some stare silently, still grappling with disbelief. Others whisper to one another, hesitant fragments of conversation. One asks where they will go, and a private responds softly, somewhere safe. For now. The words are simple, but they carry weight. Safety, something they had not known in weeks, now seems possible. The road ahead is muddy, littered with debris and remnants of battle. Burned-out vehicles, shattered trees, and abandoned helmets mark the landscape. Each boy takes it in with wide, uncertain eyes. Their training told them to focus on killing, advancing, surviving through violence. Now they are learning a new lesson. Survival can also be granted. They are prisoners yet not humiliated. Terrified yet comforted. Fearful yet alive. One boy touches the edge of a blanket, feeling the fabric against his skin. He glances at a Canadian soldier, then back at the road. His lips move silently, forming a word that hasn't been uttered in days: hope. Another boy smiles faintly, uncertain if it is appropriate. Tears mix with mud and drizzle. Laughter follows, soft, cautious but real. The convoy moves steadily, passing through villages half destroyed, streets lined with rubble, windows shattered. Civilians peek from behind walls, cautious but alive. The boys take note, absorbing every detail, every sign of life still clinging to the ruins. For them, this is not a battlefield anymore. It is a path forward, a corridor between death and an uncertain, fragile existence. And yet, the world outside is still a threat. Rumors of remaining Nazi loyalists, skirmishes, and snipers reach their ears through hushed conversations among the Canadians. Each boy knows the peace is temporary, but within the confines of the truck, warmth and human care create a bubble of reprieve. They are alive. They are moving forward. And for this brief moment, that is enough. The lieutenant glances at his men, silently acknowledging what they have achieved. It is not a victory of bullets, tanks, or strategy. It is a triumph of mercy, of humanity in a place defined by destruction. The boys may not understand fully, but in their silence, in their cautious smiles, the lieutenant sees the echo of a lesson that will linger far longer than the war itself. Compassion can survive even in the darkest hours. The trucks bump along the muddy road, the convoy stretching into the distance. Each boy holds on to life a little tighter, savoring warmth, food, and the extraordinary quiet that comes from knowing, at least for now, they are spared. Reflections in the rain. The convoy slows as it passes through a shattered village, smoke rising from charred rooftops. Broken cobblestones glisten under puddles reflecting the gray sky. The boys peer out cautiously, eyes wide, trying to absorb the devastation without fully comprehending it. Every ruined building, every abandoned cart is a silent testament to the chaos they have survived, and the chaos that could still claim them. Inside the truck, the warmth from blankets and coffee begins to settle into stiff, shivering limbs. Some boys huddle close together, seeking comfort in proximity. The lieutenant notices a young soldier tracing the edge of a blanket, fingers pressing into the worn fabric as if to confirm that safety exists tangibly, physically. He allows the gesture. These small rituals matter. Survival is more than being alive, it's reclaiming a sense of control. A Canadian private, barely older than the oldest boys, slides his hand along the shoulder of a trembling prisoner, offering reassurance. No words. Just presence. The boy flinches at first, instinct screaming to anticipate violence, then slowly relaxes. This is a human lesson, delivered not through lectures but through empathy. It is heavier than any battlefield command. The boys begin speaking softly to each other, murmurs in halting German. Questions tumble out, simple but revealing. Where will we go? Will we see home? Will we ever be safe again? The Canadians listen quietly, sometimes responding in broken German or English. Each answer is measured, careful, not condescending but real. They know trust is fragile, especially for children trained to expect betrayal at every turn. Outside, rain begins again, a fine mist clinging to their hair and uniforms. The lieutenant leans forward in the cab, eyes scanning the horizon. He knows the war is in its final throes, that the Third Reich teeters on collapse. Yet he cannot shake the tension, the knowledge that survival is never guaranteed. But within the truck, a fragile calm has taken hold. The boys are learning, slowly, that life can arrive without immediate punishment. One boy, the youngest of the group, clutches his mug tightly. He stares at the Canadian soldiers around him, attempting to reconcile their gentleness with the reality he was taught to fear. The contradictions overwhelm him. Why are these men kind when they could be cruel? Why is food offered when he expected bullets? The questions swirl, unanswerable, and yet the act itself imprints on his mind more profoundly than any lesson taught in a Hitler youth camp. A faint smile crosses the face of another boy, previously stoic, who now gazes at his hands, noticing their freedom for the first time. He flexes fingers that have only known rifle triggers, cramped and bound by fear. He realizes the ropes are gone, the threat lifted, and he is alive. The magnitude of survival, so simple yet impossible, begins to sink in. The Canadian soldiers exchange glances, silent acknowledgement passing between them. They have witnessed moments like this before, but never with children so young, never with innocence so starkly exposed. It is a moral reckoning, that even in war humanity can be chosen. And that the choice is costly, invisible, but profoundly lasting. Through the truck's open slats, smoke curls from distant fires, mingling with the mist. The boys watch, silent, realizing they are moving through a world both broken and alive. Somewhere beyond the horizon, chaos continues. Yet inside this metal vehicle, warmed by blankets, hot drinks, and unexpected kindness, a quiet miracle is unfolding, the raw essence of mercy, uncalculated and pure. As the convoy bumps along, the boys lean into the moment, tentative but growing in courage. They have survived. They have been spared. And slowly the idea that life can continue, beyond fear, beyond orders, beyond indoctrination, begins to take root. A lesson beyond the war. The convoy rolls onward through the misty countryside, the last echoes of artillery fading into the distance. The boys sit quietly, some staring at the rain-slicked fields, others tracing the seams of their damp uniforms. Each heartbeat is heavy with disbelief. They are alive, untouched, and for the first time in weeks, they sense that life has meaning beyond orders and fear. A young German soldier, barely 16, finally whispers a question, his voice trembling. Will we go home? The lieutenant glances at him, voice gentle but firm. One step at a time. You're safe with us now. The boy nods, unsure if he can trust the words, but the warmth of blankets, coffee, and human presence tells him they are true. Safety, so alien a concept, is now tangible. The older boys exchange glances, realizing that what they expected, the predictable cruelty of captured prisoners, is gone. The Canadians, battle-hardened and trained to kill, have chosen compassion over vengeance. No discipline manual prepared anyone for this. Donuts and hot drinks replacing punishment, patience replacing fear. And the boys slowly begin to understand a larger truth. Mercy is a force more powerful than violence. A private kneels to adjust the youngest boy's coat, tucking it snugly around him. Keep warm, he says simply. It is a small act, ordinary in a different world, extraordinary here. The boy leans into the gesture, eyes closing briefly, feeling safety for the first time since the war swallowed his childhood. Around him, others mimic the tentative gestures. Smiles, nods, quiet words of reassurance. Humanity, in its simplest form, threads its way through the chaos of war. The convoy approaches a temporary Canadian encampment. Tents flap in the wind, fires burn in protective metal barrels, and soldiers move with purpose but without aggression toward the prisoners. Each boy notices details they had forgotten existed. Laughter, conversation, even music faintly playing from a gramophone inside a mess tent. These are ordinary things in a world gone mad, and they feel impossible, miraculous. The lieutenant surveys the boys as they disembark, blankets wrapped around shoulders, mugs empty but hands still warm. He sees the transformation taking place, from fear to cautious trust, from child soldiers to human beings reclaiming fragments of innocence. He knows this moment will stay with them long after the war ends, a testament to the power of moral courage. The boys step tentatively onto firmer ground. Their eyes scan the encampment, still alert, still wary, but slowly adjusting to the realization that life can continue. They look at the Canadians around them, understanding that kindness has been chosen, not forced. And in that choice they see a lesson beyond orders, beyond propaganda, beyond war itself. That even in destruction humanity can prevail. One boy lifts his gaze skyward as clouds begin to part. A pale sun breaks through, illuminating the wet earth and smudged uniforms. He inhales, feeling warmth on his face. He has survived. He is alive. And for the first time he dares to imagine tomorrow. The Canadian soldiers watch in quiet satisfaction, knowing that their actions, small, deliberate, human, have rewritten the script of what it means to be victorious. No medal, no report, no commendation could capture this moment. The moment when mercy triumphed over cruelty, when humanity preserved life against the instinct of war. The boys move slowly into the camp, cautiously exploring, tasting freedom and absorbing warmth. They will never forget the smell of coffee, the sweetness of sugar, the gentle touch of hands that could have harmed but chose to heal. History may remember battles, tanks, and strategy, but they will remember donuts, blankets, and the courage to show compassion. And in that understanding, the war outside the field becomes only a backdrop to a far greater story, that even in the darkest hours, kindness can endure, and human beings, no matter how young or trapped by circumstance, can survive not only physically but morally and emotionally.